Greetings, I'm Audra Kerr Brown.
And I am Constance Malloy, and together we are the
Flashstronauts, exploring the ever-expanding universe of flash fiction
and CNF.
and CNF. So thank you for stepping aboard our ship, the Pneumaticus. And since this is our first episode, here's to the launch of the Flashtronauts. Yeah. So glad you joined us on our maiden voyage. We wanted to launch this because we love flash fiction, obviously. And there's a lot of podcasts out there and some YouTube channels, maybe on craft, but we haven't seen a lot just about, reading flash,
Discussing flash stories,
interviewing flash writers,
talking about the flash of craft, the craft of flash.
and, and crashing flash, and the process of writing flash.
Yes, and holding flash writing contests.
And highlighting flash magazines. Flash, everything flash.
Everything flash.
But before we go too far, let's introduce ourselves. Our first Flashtronaut, Constance Malloy, is the author of Tornado Dreams. She's relatively new to the universe of Flash. Her writing can be found in various star clusters, such as Bending Genres, New Flash Fiction Review, Rejection Letters, Sledgehammer, and Janus Literary. She is the host of In Conversation interviews, featured on her website, constancemalloy.com, and is a fiction editor for New Flash Fiction Review. A Gemini, she exists in neighboring bubble verses, the short form universe full of pulsars, and the long form universe full of yellow dwarf stars. On most days, she comfortably transports through a wormhole from one bubble verse to the other. When the wormhole isn't functioning, she watches a trek and calls it a day. When stationed on Earth, she resides with her husband and daughter in a red brick house in Milwaukee.
Oh, thank you, Audra. And in way of introducing my fellow Flashtronaut, Audra, Mission Command for Audra Kerr Brown is at the end of a dirt road in Iowa. Freewheeling the universe of Flash since the early 2000s, her most recent word rockets have touched down in the Best Small Fictions 2018 and 2021 editions, Wigleaf's Top 50 Very Short Fictions list, X-Ray, Milk Candy Review, People Holding, Outlook Springs, and more. Currently, she's on post searching the skies for the new and brilliant Flash fictions at the Mothership New Flash Fiction Review.
Thank you, Constance.
You're so welcome, Audra.
Today, we'll be discussing one of my favorite Flash stories from one of my favorite Flash writers. But first, for those of you who may be tuning in that are not familiar with the term Flash fiction, we'll give you a definition. So in general, these days, most writers and most Flash fiction magazines define Flash as a story of under 1,000 words. So that will be our working definition here at the Flashtronauts. But Constance, I do find more and more as I'm reading Flash fiction that the stories are getting smaller. There's a lot more within like the 300 to 700 word area, which we'll need to discuss in another episode about the ever evolving and the changing universe of Flash, because I feel like it is evolving. There's new forms within the form. And some people say this is the zenith of Flash fiction. So it's a good time, I think, to have this channel so we can talk about it as it happens.
I think so.
So today I've chosen to read and discuss a story called For Weasel Eyes Only by Bob Thurber. It was originally published about 20 years ago in Eclectica magazine. So this is officially a flash from the past.
Oh.
It's an old one, but it's a good one. And this was written 20 years ago. I don't even know if people were using the term flash fiction regularly. It's probably just coming about because I know it was called short shorts for a while or sudden fiction. And then everyone kind of came into terms that we're just going to call it flash fiction. So being 20 years old, Eclectic is still around. So I'll try to put some links in the comments to these places that we mentioned today. So check them out. They do have an archive, so you can still find Bob's story there. I'm going to read it today out of one of his short story collections, if you can see it. And there you go. Nickel Fictions Volume 1. He has several short fiction collections out. I'll just read you his bio from this. Okay, Bob Thurber. He grew up in Rhode Island. He admits to having been a deeply distracted, hyper anxious, terribly bad student who graduated high school by the skin of his teeth. He has no degrees in anything and never attended a writing class. He worked independently at writing every day for 20 years before attempting to publish, which is something we need to talk about in an episode.
Most definitely.
Getting your stories ready. Over the last decade, Bob Thurber's short fiction has received a long list of literary awards, prizes, and citations, including the Barry Hannah Fiction Prize. He is the author of Paperboy, a dysfunctional novel. His work has appeared in 24 anthologies, and he's been called a master of microfiction, an emotional terrorist. He resides in Massachusetts, and though you should most certainly avoid him at all costs, you might do well to track his whereabouts and learn more of his transgressions at www.bobthurber.net. So that's Bob. And I want to have him on the show sometime to talk more about his process because I'm really interested in it. And I want to say that I can't remember exactly when I first read him, but I do remember the first story I read, which is called The Lion Tamer's Wife. And it is in this collection. And I do want to talk about that one sometime too. But today we're going to do For Weasel Eyes Only. And you know, I don't hear a lot about Bob on social media, like on Flash Fiction Twitter, the Twitterverse. Like when I mentioned him, a lot of people are unfamiliar with him, which you know, he's won so many awards. Sometimes it makes me wonder, how have you not heard of him? But you know, he isn't on social media, and that's another thing we need to talk about sometime. Is the power of social media and the pros and the cons of being on social media. He obviously doesn't need it because he's doing quite well on his own. But people really do need to look into Bob because he's been an influence in my writing life, and I go back to his stories all the time. So let me take a trip here. And I'll read For Weasel Eyes Only. My grandpa was searching for a missing hen when he found the notes of a weasel behind his barn. Scratchy, scrubby, paw-printed memoranda. Barely readable if you ask me. Just a scattering of feathers and blood and claw marks in the soil. But Grandpa was a genius of sorts, a man who would read a thing that made no complete sense. You see these marks? Grandpa said. These markings are meant for another weasel. Turns out a weasel knew things an owl didn't, because there were notes on how to capture a hawk when the moon is cracked in two, notes on bears and bees and bushberry trees, notes on insects that glowed and the fish they attached themselves to, and how quiet air dances with rain and bruising sky creates thunder. There were even notes on weasel death, crude sketches with dashed and dotted lines showing an owl's sweeping assault with a cartoon lightning bolt in its wake. Grandpa left everything untouched, saying, "The little buggers get smarter every year and harder for me to catch." Old Grandpa is dead now, like a lot of old smart men. That weasel, too, I'm afraid, is long deceased. Though the crafty owl remains, a stuffed, dusty toy in my dank and muggy attic. Shot clean by Grandma the winter it coughed up the bones of a newborn kitten in the snow. But the weasel notes are mine, all of them.
Oh, I love that story. So you have to tell me, Audra, what about that story made you choose it for the maiden voyage of the Pumudicus?
Well, it's one that I just think of periodically. Every once in a while, it just comes up. And I think part of it is because of the weasel. Just the word weasel it's a great word. And then the whole premise of the weasels possibly leaving notes for one another, I think is just so creative and fun. And I just really have enjoyed that. And I also think his descriptions are really well. And interesting enough, if you go on, look online at Eclectica, it was originally published as a poem, which it makes sense because of his visual descriptions and his word choice. And that's another episode we need to talk about sometime, is how the relationship between poetry and flash fiction. But and we need to have Bob on here because I really want to know about his process. Like, I imagine he has a really good draft, but then he probably goes back in editing or in revising and probably switches out words, I imagine.
Mhm.
That's how I do it anyway.
Yes.
We could imagine this would be a first draft, but maybe, I don't know.
Yes.
But I really love the paragraph about describing the weasel notes. I just thought that was beautiful. Like the moon cracked in two, and then the bears and bees and bushberry.
Yeah.
Now, alliteration, is that for vowels or is that for consonants? When you have the
I believe
repetition.
consonants is assonance.
Yes.
Yes.
Then what's dissonance? Is there dissonance? That's just a musical term.
Yes.
I don't know. But anyway, I just love the rhythm of that and the sound of
Yes.
that. The bears and bees and bushberries, and how quiet air dances with rain, and the bruising sky creates thunder. It's just concrete images. There's not generalities there. And the most beautiful sentence there at the end: shot clean by grandma the winter, it coughed up the bones of a newborn kitten in the snow. I gotta
That's
take the glasses
awesome.
off for that one.
Oh,
But how he chose snow as opposed to just like a dirt ground, because it creates that blanket of white, and then you could visually see in your mind those bloody kitten bones, which I think is a great image. I love imagery. I love to see these beautiful things in my mind. So I think he did a great job. And then, when he said shot clean by grandma, he could have just said killed by grandma
right.
or just shot by grandma. But when he says shot clean, that says so much more. It has more weight to it,
Mhm.
and it says a lot about grandma as well. And then the word coughed up is just, I could go on and on.
Yes. Well, and selection, obviously, as any writer knows, is so important in what we do that, well, again, choosing coughed over spit, over it changes so much. This is a total aside, but I used to teach dance for years and years and years. And I once had a high school student ask me, who knew that I wrote, she's like, Miss Connie, do writers really like think about every word they put on the paper? And I'm like, well, the good ones do, yes. So,
Yes.
yes. So I want to talk about the title for a minute, because that's got to do with selection and word choice too. And the title, and maybe it's because the word weasels is in it, I'm not for sure, but immediately reading that title makes me want to read the story. So talk to me about the title.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And we mentioned in our bios that we both read fiction for New Flash Fiction Review. And when we go to read them in Submittable, we could see the titles. And of course, we read everything. But, there's a certain excitement that's created by a title that, such as this, which just piques your interest, and it just draws you in already, even before you read. And like, he could have had a different title. It could have been Old Grandpa Joe,
Yeah.
could have been, or Farm Memories, or maybe even Grandpa and the Weasels. But I think he could made a great choice by saying For Weasel Eyes Only, because that makes you like, what are weasels watching?
What are they looking at? What are they seeing?
Yes, weasel porn. I don't know. Muskrat love.
Yeah. And then it becomes a whole different story, and the selection becomes totally different at that point, right? Oh my,
Right. But I love that it already raises questions in your mind when you
yes.
have a good title like that.
What are the weasels looking at? I want to know immediately. So here's the thing. Do we take this story literally? Is it real? Is it grandpa's fancies? What do you think it is?
I am a very literal person. And so in my first few readings of this, I really did believe that these were weasel notes. And I think that's why I really liked it, the thought of that being possible. I tend to be drawn toward the weird and the magical.
Yeah.
And to me, this is very magical. And I like to read it like that, but I've read it a lot. And subsequent readings, I realized it could be interpreted differently. And, it could be the grandpa maybe wanted to soften the blow of finding this desecration. Like, we don't know the age of the narrator. So maybe it was a young boy at the time. And maybe it was just better to describe it as, weasel notes.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, on one hand, it reminds me of my own grandfather, who always had a story for everything, and some of them were fanciful. So, but all of them I wanted to believe, right? And so you want to believe these little weasels exchanging these notes. I think it's great. So I like to have fun and take the magical side of it as well.
Oh, good. Yeah. So I guess for our viewers out there in the comments, you could tell us your take on that. What were your thoughts? Were these real weasel notes, or was
Yeah.
it the grandpa's great stories? I don't know. Just
Or
curious.
can he speak with the weasels? I don't
Can
know.
he?
Yeah.
Like the old men, yeah, the smart old men. Like maybe
Yeah.
that was a technique that wasn't passed on. Like how to read it. Because what
Right.
also made me think of, this is totally offshoot, but like back in, I'm guessing like the Depression era, remember like tramps, they were called, and vagrants, and they would leave notes in dirt or whatever, or on
Right.
trees to say where to stop to get like good service of food and water, where not to stop. It kind of reminded me of that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I would like to see if that's what Bob thought of.
Yeah. Pulling from that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Very cool. Well, I want to know, or I want to announce that the Flashstronauts are going to start a channel mag.
Wait, did you say a channel mag?
I did.
What's that?
Well, a channel mag is this. We are going to pick a theme for every month. And once we get up and rolling, which we're not going to be up and rolling this month, so this is something that will be starting in August, we're going to tie all 4 episodes of the month into the theme and announcing that on the first week. And we are also going to open a sub call for Flash that is based on our theme for the month. And we will have a 2-week submission window. And then Audra and I will go into our little queue and select a winner. And then the winner will be invited to be a guest on the Flashtronauts and to read their work, and we'll talk about it together. And once we really get up and rolling, we are going to have some really great swag for our guests, which will be very fun.
Oh, it
So please look forward to that. Yeah, that's our channel mag.
sounds flashtastic.
Ha. And it should be a lot of fun. Yes.
Yes. And so the themes will start in August. So this is our introductory month. So we're going to have a few things just that we want to talk about in Flash. So I thank you for joining us in our maiden voyage. And be sure to join us next week as the Flashstronauts once again board our trusty ship, the Pumudicus, and travel the ever-expanding universe of Flash. But first of all, to keep us going, we're very new to this, and this wasn't too turbulent of a ride. This was pretty good. It was pretty smooth. But we do need you to like and subscribe us and ring the bell and follow us on Twitter, and we will soon be on Instagram. So we would really appreciate all of your support. And then if you have any additional comments, please comment. And also, if you have a favorite Flash author of your own or a favorite Flash story, you can put those in the comments as well. We would appreciate it. So, Constance.
So yes, so be sure to join us next week when we, the Flashstronauts, once again take off in our mighty Pumudicus ship and sail across the universe. And until then, we say keep flashing.
Keep
Well,
flashing. Stay safe and
stay
keep
safe and keep flashing. But flashing, writing, flashing, not it. Flashing.
I'm glad you corrected that.
Yeah, because that could then get back into that weasel porn thing, and that's not. So anyway.
Okay. Well, great. Thanks again for joining us, the Flastronauts.
Yes.
Until
Bye,
next
everyone.
time.
Yep.